We have created our first script, but it's not yet doing what we want it to do. It is printing a message to the console saying load the scene every time I run into the door. However, when the game is published, the console will not be visible to the player. The console is really just for us as the developer to debug and to test. So we need to change this. The first thing I'm going to do is comment out this line of code. I could delete it so that it doesn't print out to the console, but if I put 2 forward slashes in front of it, it creates a comment. This is a way of giving yourself a note in your code that will be ignored when the game runs. In this case, I'm using the comment just to comment out a line of code that maybe I want to put back in later. Next, I'm going to write the line of code that will load a new scene. Currently, I'm in scene 2, and I want it to load scene 1 when I hit the door. I'm going to write in scene manager dot load scene. Then inside the parentheses, I need to give it 2 parameters. The first one is a string, so it's going to be inside of quotes. A string is just a series of characters, and it's going to be the name of the scene that I want to load. That will be scene 01. The second parameter, so I need a comma, will be the mode that I want to load the scene in. In this case, load scene mode dot single. You'll learn later that the options for the different parameters can be found in the API online, and every command ends with a semicolon. If I save this with Control S, go back to Unity, it does say now there's some errors that have to be fixed. It says the name Scene Manager does not exist in the current context. Going back to Sublime, this is because Scene Manager is an object that Unity doesn't automatically know about. We have to tell it that we're using the scene management package. If I come up to the very top, I add an additional using directive, using Unity Engine dot scene management. If I save it again, come back to Unity, and the error goes away. Let's see what happens when I run it. And there you go. I did get an error when I hit the door. It didn't load the new scene, but something happened. So let's read that error. It says scene 1 couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings or the asset bundle has not been loaded. Well, in this case, it is the build settings, and it even tells you where to go to add something to the build settings. It's under File, Build Settings. So let's press Escape and get out of the game. Go to File, Build Settings. And the build settings, amongst other things, will let you tell it which scenes are part of the build. There's nothing here. I could say add open scenes, but that's only going to open scene 2, the one I'm currently showing. If I also want to add scene 1, come down to your project window, go into your scenes folder, where you hopefully have both of your scenes saved, and drag in whatever scenes you want to drag in. In this case, there's scene 1. Now they're both inside of there. I don't need to build or build and run. For now, I'm just going to hit the red X and run the game again. Now when I run up to the door and hit it, it loaded my new scene. What we want is when I hit this other door, it'll load back to scene 1 again. I'm going to press Escape and get out of there. Notice when I stop, it brings me back to the scene I was currently working in. So currently, anything that hits that door's collider, it will go through its trigger and cause the load scene to happen. Which is good if we are the ones that hit the door, but what if we have an enemy running around the room and they hit the door? We don't want to be loaded into a new scene. Or what if there is a ball in the room that I kick or some object that I kick and it hits the door? We don't want it to load us into another scene because of that. Let's test that out actually. Let's throw in a sphere and see if we can make it hit the door when we run into it. I'm going to right click in the hierarchy, say 3D object, sphere, and it put it there, which is not quite the center of the world, it almost is. I can go to reset to put it in the center. That puts it into the ground some a little bit, so maybe I do want to raise it up. The other thing is the light is right here, which it doesn't need to be. If I click on directional light, I can drag that wherever I want. It doesn't matter where I put it, it's going to have the same lighting effect. I'm actually going to scroll out some and move it completely out of the room up above here, and then zoom back in. And I have the same lighting, it's just not in my way now. If I click on the sphere, and I'm going to actually call this ball just to give it a more meaningful name. And I think I'll even create a material for it. If I go into my materials folder, this time I'm going to create a material. I'm going to right click, say create material. I'll call this ball. I'm going to change the albedo color to something like red. You can see a sample of it in the bottom right corner there. I can also drag it right onto the ball. I'm going to add the rigid body component so that physics will be applied to it, and press run. There you go, saw it drop. If I get right behind it and knock it towards the door, it's a little bit too heavy. I'm going to press escape. I'm going to make the ball larger first. Make sure it's up a little bit. And I'm going to change the mass, make it a little lighter so I can knock it around a little easier. I'll make it 0.5 and try running it again. If I get behind it and knock it towards the door, there it goes. It hit the door and loaded a new scene, which is not what I want to do. I'm going to press escape, stop it, and we need to change our code for this to make sure that it's only me hitting the door that will load a new scene. I'm going to write an if statement, a conditional statement, which will check to make sure that conditional statement is true before it runs the load scene command. So the way you write a conditional statement usually is with an if, followed by the parentheses. Inside the parentheses you'll have your condition, and then curly braces for the block of code that will run if that condition is true. We're going to move this code inside that if statement. So what goes in this if statement? What is the condition? We want to be able to say something like, is the game object that hit me the player character? If it is, then we'll load the scene. If some other game object hit me, we'll just do nothing. We won't load a scene. So we need to know how to get, or how to know, what is the game object that hit me. We know that this script is attached to the door, but we don't know for sure what caused the onTriggerEnter to run. Unity provides us a method of doing this. In fact, the onTriggerEnter method provides us a way of getting this information. If you were to look up this method online in the API, which we'll learn about later, you would see that we could, inside the parentheses, receive that information in a parameter. So we are going to receive the collider. That is the type of object we're receiving. What is the collider that hit me, or what is the collider that caused this onTriggerEnter to run? You can name it anything you want. I'm going to name it other because it is the other collider. Remember, the door has a collider. This script is already aware of that collider because it's attached to the door object. But the other is the other collider. How do I, in the code down here, say the game object that hit me? Well, other refers to the collider that hit me. And if I say dot game object, now I know which game object hit me. And we want to know if that is the player character. Well, how do you say is? It's the double equal sign. It checks to see, does this equal something else? With one equal sign, you're doing an assignment. You're saying let something equal something else. But with two equal signs, you're doing a logical operation. You're checking, does one thing equal another thing? And that will return true or false. If it returns true, then what's inside the if block will be executed. So how do I say the player character? One way to do this is to use the game object with a capital G .find method. What this does, it allows you to search for a game object from your hierarchy. And so inside the parentheses of the find method, inside quotes, you can write the name of the object you're searching for. In this case, FPS controller. If I save this, come back to Unity and press run, I'm going to try to knock that ball into the door. There we go, and it didn't load a scene. But if I run into the door, then it does. I'm going to press escape, go back to the script. I'm going to comment the debug.log back in, but this time instead of printing out load the scene, I'm going to print something else out. I'm going to delete that, and I'm also deleting the quotes around it, because instead of printing out a literal string, I'm going to print out a variable that's of type string. In this case, other.gameObject.name. You can see what other is. It is a collider. It is the collider that hit the door. .gameObject says what is the game object that that collider belongs to. And then .name is what is the name of that game object. I'm going to save this. I'm going to open the console window so I can see things being printed out and press run again. And now when I hit the ball towards the door, as soon as it collides, I see in the console it says ball. If I run into the door, now it says FPS controller. That's a nice debugging method. If what you are trying to do doesn't work, you can print out the name of different objects and see if it is what you expect it to be. I'm going to comment this out because I don't need it to be printing to the console, and save it. This script is now working for this one door. In the next lesson, we're going to modify this script so it's more flexible and we can use it in different situations.